You're listening to the Served Up Show, a podcast that features inspiring beverage professionals and topic experts that share their passions through meaningful content. Your hostesses, Bridget Albert, is best known as the Market Fresh Mixologist, an industry mentor with over 25 years of experience. And I'm Julie Milroy, best known for my passion for leading change and helping others grow in their careers. Grab a cocktail and sit back. Let's learn how we can make a positive impact in our industry.
Hey y'all, it's Bridget here. We are honored to be powered by the women winemakers of Banshee and Ferrari-Carano at the Food Network's New York City Wine and Food Festival. This is a star-studded 4-day event showcasing the talents of world-renowned chefs, wine and spirit experts, and so much more at the Food Network New York City Wine and Food Festival. I had the honor and pleasure of chatting with my new friend, Carlton McCoy. Carlton McCoy has a vast history in the hospitality industry. He's also the second African American in the world to pass the Master Sommelier exam. Together, he and his partner, Galen Lawrence Jr., bought the Heights Cellar, a whole host of vineyards and a tasting room. Carlton is now the managing partner of the Lawrence Wine Estates and CEO and president of Heights Cellar, making him the first Black CEO in a Napa winery. Just wow. Carlton also co-founded the Roots Fund in 2020, and it helps to create a pathway for both Black and Indigenous people to engage with and pursue careers in the wine industry. So sit back, relax, grab yourself a glass of wine, and enjoy this very special episode. Carlton, welcome to Served Up. I am so excited to have you on the show today from the New York City Wine and Food Festival.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's a gorgeous day.
It is a beautiful day. Can you tell our listeners what really inspired you to enter the wine community?
You know, I got my start actually in the kitchen. And I was a cook before I went to the Culinary Institute of America. And that was really my world. And when I was there, I was introduced to wine for the first time in my life as part of the curriculum. You have to take a wine class there. And outside of just being terrified to fail the class, it was never something I thought I was actually going to do as a career. Found it very interesting because I didn't grow up around wine. And it was always, to me, deemed as something that was like out of touch, culturally. It wasn't something that I really interacted with. So I really didn't think too much past just getting through the class. When I went to New York to cook, and I worked in some really fantastic kitchens, and decided to take a job in the dining room to learn more about service and hospitality and in restaurant management, because that was my goal initially, was to open and run restaurants. I really fell in love with it. Learning about wine was a part of that. In hospitality, I had a manager at the time that says, if you really want to do this well, you have to learn about wine. You have to learn about cocktails. Beverage is a big part of what we do. So I started to study, and that became my focus. The career in wine sort of followed that, and I sort of never looked back.
That's amazing. Yeah. Can you take me from finding that passion for wine, for hospitality? Because I always say it's like you either love this industry or you don't. There's not a lot of gray area in that. And so when you say, culturally, it was really important for you to dive into wine, and, can you talk about that?
Yeah. Well, I think it's I've always loved people, and the food and beverage industry is a people business, in what we do. And it became another way to connect with people. It was another form of cultural exploration that I wanted to dive into. And it was just something that I wasn't really exposed to, so it was all new and it was very exciting. Where I grew up, people don't really drink wine. Actually, in most of America, people didn't drink wine. Especially, I was born in the '80s. It's a very new thing to go in Middle America and go to liquor stores and see the amount of option that we have today. So it's very exciting. So, when I was in college, when I got out, when I started to study wine, it was when Americans were really starting to actually sort of geek out about wine. And, I heard about what a master sommelier was. And I think the growth of that organization in this country, I think really built a demand for wine in a very fast way because there was educated servants, right?
Correct.
And we had, it was no longer just the maitre d' that went and grabbed the bottles. Like there were dedicated people in restaurants that would talk to you about wine, which America didn't really have many of for a long time. But even through the quartermaster sommeliers, we were educating every server and bartender and maitre d'. So just the level of education for the service staff had increased so much. And I was part of that movement and that wave that just made it so much easier to engage. But in that, I found a whole new community of very passionate people. When you connect with passionate people, you realize it's the same in wine and food and art and music. These are people who are passionate about some cultural aspects. So in a sense, it was very similar to the time I spent in the kitchen.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Can you talk about then from your time outside of the kitchen through hospitality, and then what really brought you to kind of, to have your own thing? Can we talk about that?
Yeah. I've, I do feel that the best life to live is the one that you don't plan too far out. And I've lived my life that way, and it's given me the opportunity to take advantage of some really fantastic opportunities that otherwise I would not have been open to or seen. And I after New York, I moved back to DC, where my family's from, where I'm from, and that was really nice. I've been away for so long, 6-7 years of college in New York and so forth. And I started to study wine in DC, and then I moved out to Aspen. I was in Aspen for 9 years. And that was really finishing school. I learned how to understand the business of our industry, which was also really intrigued me as well. Is how do we get a bottle of wine to the table? How do we get it to the retail store? How does that even work? And that really challenged me, and I really enjoyed it. And it really primed me for my next move, which was I call it quasi-entrepreneurial because the spirit is very entrepreneurial, but we're really fortunate to have the funding we need to achieve what we have to achieve. So I was blessed to be able to connect with the Lawrence family, Galen Lawrence specifically, who has become not only, I guess, sort of our company's owners, but also like a business mentor and sort of a father figure as well. He's a really exceptional man. And he really taught me a lot about business and business mind. And I was able to apply that to what we do in the wine business in a really big way. And what it allowed me to do was to ensure that we were successful, but we never had to sacrifice. Because that's something that's really important. And is that we truly believe that you can be entrepreneurial, be very successful, but be very strict with your convictions and your philosophies and what you hold very important. And it makes it harder, but it's really important for us. And through that, we've been able to build an enterprise that we feel has a really unique identity and philosophy, and very quickly.
Yeah, I mean, what you're doing, going really from square one in hospitality, and now it's really to have your own bottle.
And everything's hospitality.
It has to be like...
If you're in the business of selling anything, you're in hospitality.
Yeah, 1,000%.
You are. I think even if you're not in the business, you're in a business of... Hospitality is a mindset to lifestyle. If you're a school teacher, you're in the hospitality business, right? Hospitality is about being selfless and attempting to... It's empathetic. It's about trying to be a good human. Ultimately, is what hospitality is really about. So I applied that to what we do in Napa, and we do with our imports at Domain as well. We have 6 estate wineries in Napa in one brand, and we have Domain Estates, which is our California-based negociant company that not only represents our wineries but is an agency to at least a dozen other brands and soon 20 brands, and is growing very quickly. And that all of our companies run independently, but it all funnels up to some very particular pillars and values of how we operate.
Let's talk about those pillars and your values, because one of the things that you co-founded was the Roots Fund.
Yeah.
And I want to know, and I want our listeners to know, what that is and why that was important for you to do.
Sure. I feel very, very blessed to have found wine for a number of reasons. I do feel, and I don't mean this egotistically, I could have been equally successful in the food industry. but there is something about wine that it connects you to, I think, more cultural pillars than food. Food is so important, but food is a part of the wine industry. They all, you go to wine regions, and there's some of the best cooks in the region are these guys who own wineries. For me, I said, well, I was only exposed to wine because of culinary school, and it didn't really, and that was only very brief. It was through the industry where I learned about it, where I said, there's so many other communities in the country that culturally just don't engage with wine. And if they knew that, there was this whole incredible industry that connects you with the rest of the world, then they would probably jump at it. So we created the Roots Fund to essentially just build more diversity in our industry. And, we I always talk about pillars, right? But we have these sort of 3 pillars that we work within the Roots Fund. The Roots Fund is a nonprofit that was created to create diversity in the industry, but it's about education as educating people on what the options are in the industry. And then we raise funds because no nonprofit works without proper funding.
Right.
And we fund educational and cultural opportunities for communities that typically do not engage with wine. And these are, minorities and communities of color specifically. And then we help them with job placement in mentoring to be able to, the same way I've been mentored, to help those communities and those people be successful in their careers. And for me, I am a very driven entrepreneurial person. I don't ever believe in giving anyone anything. Everything is earned. So what we do is we show them a path. And mentoring is sometimes a quick text, or it's a 3-minute conversation where I'm thinking about this. What do you think? And that goes a long way. And for us, it's been really gratifying to see, companies like Southern Glazers jump on board and help support Roots Fund in a really big way. And it's just, it helps you sort of reaffirm how fantastic this industry is, and that it is a people business.
Absolutely. And then can you tell our listeners where can they find more information about the Roots Fund?
Yeah, so you can go online and just Google the Roots Fund. There's no other organization like it. I think that's why we got the name. But and if you go on the website, what you'll find is there are ways to donate funds. There's also ways to contribute your time in mentorship and so forth. There is events where you can donate product. That goes a very long way. And again, I can't say how grateful I am for to be able to work in an industry where people get behind these things and they go, yeah, more diversity in this industry, it's only going to make it more exciting. And I'd say equally as important, it's only going to open up our beverages to a larger demographic of the nation. As a wine drinker, I always go, well, there is the philanthropic approach, which, is always nice, where you just do things because you think it's good for society. But the other part is businesses. And we have a very large percentage of this country that doesn't engage with wine because they just don't know how to, or culturally they don't. So when we see people from those communities working in the industry and marketing the beverage themselves, you're naturally just going to have more people engaging. And as someone who oversees an enormous amount of wineries that want to sell to Americans, it's in our best interest to be able to invest in those communities now, and we'll reap the benefits, if not this generation, the next generation for sure.
Let me ask you something, just on the consumer side, right? Because, what you're saying, very much rings home for the trade, for the beverage trade. But as a consumer, wine can also be very intimidating, especially now compared to 20 years ago, because you look in a liquor store, let's say, and there's so many bottles and so many labels. Do you have some tips for the consumer on how to approach wine?
Yeah. I think that as someone who is a master sommelier, I think we've been probably the greatest and the worst thing for the wine industry. And the greatest because we really brought a lot of awareness to wine as this beautiful natural beverage. And it got people really excited about it because we saw Americans in suits, with the wine key and the decanter. And you go, wow, it's not just a bunch of stuffy old European guys. We can do this too. But I think we also maybe put too much emphasis on education. And what I mean by that is wine is a pretty unique beverage where you don't need to know much about it to enjoy it. And I think that we need to focus more on pleasure these days.
I love that.
You need a very small amount of education to be dangerous. And the fact that we even know grapes, I don't think the American consumer understands that they're far more educated than the European consumer. you can go to regions in France where people are from there and they'll know the names of the village and things like this. They won't know the grapes that are in the bottle. The fact that we label wines by grapes' names and we know grapes and we know what a Cabernet tastes like or a Pinot tastes like, you are light years ahead of the vast majority of the world. So I guess people should just take pressure off themselves and once in a while just go, I've had Pinot before, I like Pinot. Let me just, what am I comfortable spending? Just grab one and drink it. I always say, what's the worst going to happen? You're going to buzz and then you don't like it, don't buy it again.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be that serious. I tell people all the time is, I've driven cars since I was 15 years old. Outside of changing the oil in the tire, I couldn't tell you how the thing works. But somehow I use it every day. I take great pleasure in using it. And I think with wine I think we focus so much on education that I think we've forgotten to remind people that it's a beverage of pleasure.
Yeah. I really love those words, and I have not heard them really from anyone. It's very much always focused, whether in wine or spirits, on that education piece. But damn it, we should just open up a bottle and see what happens. See what magic's in that bottle, right?
Just a little bit. And I always say, grab a bottle, drink it, Google it. The internet is such an incredible tool. You can find out so much about a wine really, really quickly. And you taste it and you go, that's cool. Oh, it comes from there. That's awesome. That's it. It doesn't have to be so serious. And the risk, if you're spending what you're comfortable spending, what is the risk? Really, if you're going to buy a bottle of wine, you're going to buy a bottle of wine. It's within your budget. Again, what's the actual risk? Right? It's not your favorite. Just don't buy it again. Try something else.
Yeah, that's really great advice.
But this is the best time in the world to be a wine consumer. The average quality of wine anywhere in the world is exceptional at every price point.
Yeah, it sure is.
Yeah.
I would love to leave our listeners with one last thought, and this is really to those who would like to break into the wine industry.
Sure.
What's your advice?
There's a lot of roads into the wine industry. That's also what makes it very, very exciting. Is you got to sort of find out what part of the industry you want to be in. Do you want to be in the farming and winemaking side? Or do you want to be in what we call sort of the front of the house of the winery, doing marketing and sales, which is a whole different competency. Look at your personality type. What do you feel that you'd want to get into? And they all have very, very different roads. But as a career, that is very different than the consumer. As a career, you need to be very knowledgeable. And what I can say is, the people that you can see in the wine industry that are probably the most successful are people who spend a lot of time reading a lot of boring wine books and studying to be able to be where they are. And it is not the glamorous part. They don't make often many movies and things like that about people sitting around just studying a book of wine. It's not very exciting. But that knowledge gives you what you need to be able to understand what you're either producing or selling, or marketing. And then you go into the world. And I would say try a couple things, right? Don't just anchor, go, I'm going to go do that. I've done multiple jobs in the wine industry. And again, because I don't go, well, I'm going to do that. I go, well, I'm going to work in the wine industry at some level. And I've done a number of things. And the wine industry is unique in that sense, but you can jump between different segments if you have a base level of knowledge. That's really what it gives you, that ability to jump between careers in wine is having a certain amount of knowledge.
Yeah, that's really good advice for both the consumer and for those who want to break in. I want to thank you for being on Served Up today.
No, it's my pleasure. My absolute
goodness.
Pleasure.
Here at the New York City Wine and Food Festival.
Yes.
It's incredible to meet you here. I do hope that you'll come back on this show.
Yes.
And I just want to wish you some great health and a whole lot of peace. So thank you for being on Served Up.
I love it. It's a great ending.
Yeah, cheers.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. Served Up is brought to you by Southern Glazers Wine and Spirits. Produced by Zunu.online. Music by We Kill the Lion can be found on Spotify. Make sure to subscribe to be notified of future Served Up episodes. Cheers!